First of all, I want to say thank you for that kind introduction. Good evening, and I'm honored to have an opportunity to speak with you tonight. As I listened to the accomplishments and the introductory remarks, I could not help but acknowledge that it was this community that ensured that those accomplishments were possible. It's incredible how a community can develop us as individuals. So tonight, I want to talk about my community. Nobel Peace Prize winner Albert Schweitzer said, "At times, our own light goes out and is rekindled by a spark from another person. Each one of us has cause to think with deep gratitude of those who have lighted the flame within us." As I drove here tonight, I cannot help but think about the doors that have opened up for me from this community. I want to take a trip down memory lane decades ago. I was on my way to the federal courthouse. Now, I'm from Sacramento, but it was not often that I was downtown. So once I found the courthouse, I remember walking up those steps and looking at the towering building and being nervous about stepping inside of it. At that time, I was in my last year of law school, and I was being given an amazing opportunity. A few days earlier, at the time, the assistant dean of student affairs approached me and said that she had an opportunity for me to interview with a federal magistrate judge as an extern. Now, as a first-generation law student, I had no idea what an extern was. I didn't know who to contact because I didn't know any attorneys. I knew that I should know what an extern was, so I didn't want to embarrass myself and ask anyone. I borrowed my grandmother's suit, my mother's shoes, and I started preparing for that interview. And at that time, I realized what a gift it was. I was fortunate enough to be hired as an extern. I was inspired by seeing the work of a federal judge, seeing the fairness and impartiality that I saw in the courtroom, the inner workings of the court, and speaking with a judge about the law. I had a thought for a split moment that maybe one day I could return back to that courthouse and work there. But most importantly, I was able to see firsthand the due process afforded to my community. But I wasn't the only extern or law clerk hired from this community. Federal judges in the Eastern District actively search for students and attorneys from our area to provide similar opportunities. That's our legal community here in Sacramento, seeking to uplift others from within. Cesar Chavez captured it well when he said, "We cannot seek achievement for ourselves and forget about the progress and prosperity for our community. Our ambitions must be broad enough to include aspirations and the needs of others for their sakes and for our own." So what is community? We've heard about it a lot tonight. As you think back to receiving help and support and guidance from another when you most needed it, it's interesting to reflect on the fact that oftentimes that person was a complete stranger or someone you didn't have a close relationship to. The course of our life can be altered by those moments. And it's often those moments, they didn't depend on what you believed or who you knew or what you were willing to give. It didn't matter what your background or experience or beliefs were. And as a community, one way we give back is through mentorship. Present tonight, we heard lawyers, judges, law students, school professors, and deans. And we can all think back to someone who opened the door for us to get us where we are today, who inspired us and maybe didn't even know it, who guided us and put a hand out to pull us up. The impact of mentorship is substantial. To receive guidance from someone who we respect, who maybe we one day want to walk in their shoes. And it can be that one brief moment in passing that impacts us well into the future. One day I received a jury summons, and I was expected to go a few blocks from here to the Sacramento Superior Court. Now, at the time I was in college. I was 18, Wasn't sure what I was gonna do in my future, but I knew I had to go sit for a week over at the Superior Court and see if I would be picked to sit on a jury. And I was, and it was that experience in watching court in session that impacted me. Observing the judge ensuring that the defendant received a fair trial, watching the attorneys zealously advocate, I was drawn in. So anytime I had a free moment when I wasn't working or at school, I was observing court in session. That was my community after all. I was a participant by just observing. One of the many days of watching court, a judge who I didn't know questioned me and said, why was I observing all the time? And while I explained to her that I was just interested in watching because I was fascinated with the judicial process, she encouraged me to go to law school. That act of community, that act of mentorship, the one moment out of her day that changed the trajectory of my life, she lit the flame within me merely because she took the moment to uplift someone from her community. And I know you have a similar story, whether you are the recipient or the one who gave the connection or the guidance or the advice. So why is community so important? Besides the emotional support, helping us to develop a sense of identity and belonging, the pivotal moment that helps change the direction of one's life for the better. Now, as a new federal judge, I've been asked to speak at various events, and usually I have an understanding of the association or the program or the event in which I'll be speaking. But this time it was different. It was an event called Pathways to Progress. Some of you may have heard of it. I hadn't at the time. And so when I was researching to prepare my remarks, I was inspired again by this community. I imagined it would be similar to a job fair, but it was so much more than that. The Federal Defender's Office, the U.S. Attorney's Office, Federal Probation, and Federal Pretrial Services all came together to connect justice-involved individuals with education, employment, and wellness resources. They provided information on health resources, all designed to assist and support justice-involved individuals in rehabilitation, empowerment, and progress. And as I walked through that fair, there were vendors lined up and I talked to them. They told me they were there to provide services for veterans, to provide services for individuals who needed substance use treatment, financial literacy, or training in education, or college and work training. I heard stories of those who had turned their lives around, thanks in part to the support of those volunteers, vendors, and agencies that were present on that day. I was so inspired by those involved, as Cesar Chavez said, who did not forget about the progress for our community and the needs of others. It seems that each day we're busier than the last, and there are not enough hours in the day. Can we take the time to invest in another? Do our words actually really impact others? Yes, they do. They absolutely do. Thank you for allowing me a moment to share a bit about my community and the profound impact it has had on me. I encourage you to reflect on the good and how to continue to pay it forward to ensure we continue to uplift others through guidance, support, progress, and inspiration. Thank you.